son struck her across the table, raging over soup without salt. Martha Jenkins, a widowed mother, didn't shed a tear. By dawn, her will and every deed would strip him of the power he thought he held. I'm curious, where in the world are you joining us from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and make sure you're subscribed for all the latest updates. It wasn't the soup that stung. It was his hand. The spoon clattered against the bowl before she even turned around. Maria flinched at the sound. Ceramic on wood, sharp and final. She stood at the stove, fingers curled slightly around the wooden ladle as the chicken broth bubbled low. A recipe she'd made for 40 years. Bits of carrot, softened onion, wide egg noodles. Her nose told her it was undersalted, but her hands were tired, her thoughts scattered. Behind her, the chair scraped. You forgot the damn salt again. Daniel's voice was flat but simmering. She turned slowly, a half apology forming on her lips. I'll add some now. His hand landed before her sentence finished. A loud, open-handed slap. No build-up, no hesitation. It wasn't the first time. Her head whipped sideways. Her balance wobbled. The smell of broth and soap and fried garlic vanished beneath the sharp sting blooming across her cheek. Daniel stood, shaking his head like he was the one disappointed. You can't even make soup right anymore. Then he sat back down and finished eating. Maria stood still. Her arms hung limp, her mouth pressed shut. When the bowl scraped again, this time it was empty. He tossed it in the sink like trash, muttered something about her being useless, and thundered upstairs. The slam of his bedroom door was the only punctuation to the silence that followed. Maria remained in the kitchen long after his footsteps disappeared. The fluorescent light buzzed above her, flickering slightly. She didn't blink, didn't cry. Her cheek pulsed, but it was background noise now. Later, she moved like a ghost down the hallway, into the bathroom. She flicked on the light. The mirror showed her the truth. Blood at the edge of her lip, a spreading flush across her face, and tired, so very tired eyes. She reached for a damp washcloth and pressed it gently to the rising welt. It was mechanical, almost ritual. She had done this before, but this time her lips moved, just a whisper. Enough. Back in the kitchen, she sat at the table in the dark. The soup cooled in the pot. The room smelled like sorrow and garlic. She looked down at her hands, weathered, veined, still strong. These hands had held him as an infant, picked him up after schoolyard falls, stirred this exact soup for decades. He had forgotten. Or maybe he never knew. She pushed herself up slowly and walked to her bedroom. Inside a box beneath her bed were old papers, her husband's death certificate, her house deed, old photographs, a faded church program. She gathered what mattered and placed it in a manila envelope. She wrote one word across the front in shaky cursive. Attorney. Then she stood at her mirror again, wrapped her scarf over her bruised cheek, and sat on the edge of her bed. For the first time in years, she didn't ask herself what he would say if she left. She asked what she would become if she stayed. That night, Maria hides her bruises and whispers to herself, enough. Sometimes the loudest screams are silent. Maria stood in front of the mirror again the next morning, tracing the curve of the bruise with the tips of her fingers. It had deepened overnight, purple, blue, with a fading edge of red, a smear of shame where love should have lived. But today, she didn't look away. She tied the scarf again, tighter this time, and dabbed on a little face powder, more out of habit than hope. No especially not about old women and their adult sons. Downstairs, Daniel was already gone. He always left early. God forbid he miss his precious work meetings, the ones that made him feel important while treating her like the hired help. Maria opened the kitchen window just a crack, letting in the sharp bite of winter, cold but honest. Unlike the warmth in this house, she sat at the kitchen table with a cup of weak coffee and pulled out her journal. The pages were filled with ordinary things, grocery lists, old recipes, reminders to call the pharmacy, but tucked between them were details no one else knew. A timeline, the dates of every outburst, the insults, the slaps. She turned to a blank page and began writing in her slanted, careful hand. December 12th, left side of face, backhand, no warning. Then, without pausing, she added, "It will be the last." A knock on the door startled her. For a moment, fear jolted up her spine, but when she peeked through the curtain, it was only Rosa from 2 houses down, arms full of fabric, cheeks pink from the cold. "I found some old yarn in the attic," Rosa chirped when Maria opened the door. "Thought maybe you'd want to knit again." Maria nodded, accepting the bag without showing her face fully. Rosa didn't pry. She never did, but her eyes lingered just a second too long on the scarf. "I lit a candle for your husband yesterday," Rosa added softly. "It's been how many years now?" 8, Maria whispered. Rosa smiled gently. "He was a good man. You don't see men like that anymore." "No, you didn't." After Rosa left, Maria returned to her room. She reached for the top shelf of the closet, dragging down an old cigar box wrapped in rubber bands. Inside, the original deed to the house, birth certificates, marriage license, and a few crisp $100 bills she'd stashed away over time. But it was the envelope that mattered most, the one she had labeled attorney the night before. She added to it now photocopies of Daniel's credit card bills she'd found in the trash, her journal pages, and an old photo of herself holding baby Daniel, back when he still smiled when she entered a room. In the bottom drawer of her dresser, she pulled out an old, unused roll of stamps and addressed the envelope with care. Her handwriting shook, but her purpose did not. Later that evening, Maria walked 2 blocks in the dark, her scarf pulled high. She reached the old blue mailbox on the corner and dropped the envelope inside. It landed with a soft clunk, final, absolute. Back home, she lit a candle on her windowsill. Not for prayer, not this time. It was a signal to herself. She was still here. She would not be erased. She tucks important papers into an envelope marked attorney. "He thought I was weak. I brought the law." The office smelled faintly of lemon polish and paper. Maria sat stiffly on the edge of a leather chair, the manila envelope clutched tight in her hands. Her scarf was pulled low over her cheek, but it didn't hide the swelling completely. Across from her, Miss Harris, a woman in her early 40s, sharp-eyed with a calm voice, folded her hands on the desk. "You don't have to rush," she said gently. "Whenever you're ready." Maria nodded once, then slowly, she opened the envelope. Photocopies, journal pages, a snapshot of her bruised face taken in the mirror that morning, Daniel's overdue credit notices, the deed to the house, proof of everything she had spent the last 3 decades building, and what he had begun to chip away at. Ms. Harris flipped through each item silently, her brows tightening. When she looked up, her voice had changed. "This is more than enough," she said. Maria swallowed hard. "He doesn't hit me every day," she said softly, "but he doesn't have to. He controls everything, the money, the car, who I see, what I say. He checks the bank account like it's his. I live in his moods, not in my own home. Miss Harris leaned forward, steady but firm. You don't owe me an apology for surviving. Maria's hands trembled slightly. I didn't raise him to be this way. His father, my Henry, was a good man, strong but kind. Daniel changed after he died, or maybe I just didn't want to see it. You're seeing it now, Miss Harris replied, and you're not just seeing it, you're doing something about it. Maria looked down at her lap, eyes brimming but dry. I'm tired of hiding bruises like sins. Silence passed between them, like a shared truth. Miss Harris pulled out a notepad. Here's what I can offer: a restraining order, financial protection, and full legal control of your property. We'll notify the bank and freeze anything Daniel might try to access. But Maria, she paused. Once this begins, he'll know, and he won't take it quietly. I know, Maria said. That's why I brought this now, before I lose the courage. Ms. Harris nodded. We'll move carefully, but swiftly. Maria reached into her purse and pulled out a smaller envelope. One more thing, she said. Inside was her will, or rather, the new version she had spent the last week writing in secret. I want him removed, she said, her voice steadier no. Everything, my house, what's left in savings. I want it to go to the community kitchen and my granddaughter. She's the only light he didn't manage to dim. Miss Harris opened the will, brows rising slightly. Are you sure? Absolutely, Maria said. If Daniel gets nothing, maybe that'll finally be enough to make him stop seeing me as something he can use. Miss Harris smiled slowly. I've handled cases for 30 years, but women like you remind me why I started. Maria gave the faintest smile in return. As she stood to leave, Miss Harris reached across the desk. You did the hard part. Now let me carry some of it. Maria nodded once, then turned to go, her steps slow but certain. Outside, the sky had turned a steel gray, but for the first time in months, Maria didn't feel cold. Ms. Harris warns, if he finds out, he'll fight back hard. He stole my peace. I protected my future. Maria stepped off the city bus, one stop early. The snow had turned slushy on the sidewalk, soaking through her shoes, but the cold barely touched her. Her mind was sharp, focused. She walked 2 blocks down to a modest credit union she'd passed 100 times but never entered. Inside, the warmth and hum of quiet banking filled the air. No Christmas music, no loud TVs, just people and purpose. The teller was a young woman with box braids and kind eyes. She looked up and smiled. Good morning. How can I help you today? Maria held her scarf close to her cheek. I'd like to open a personal account, just for me, and very private. The woman nodded, understanding immediately. Of course, ma'am, right this way. She led Maria into a small office. The manager, a middle-aged man named Curtis, joined them moments later. He had the look of someone who'd seen things and knew not to ask too many questions. Maria slid her ID, social security card, and a small folder across the desk. I'd like this is in my name only, she said. No joint access, no online statements. Curtis glanced at the bruise she hadn't quite managed to hide. His voice softened. We can make sure it stays completely confidential. Only paper statements, sent wherever you request. No digital trail unless you want one. Maria nodded. Good. As they set up the account, she withdrew $9,000 in total. Every last dollar she'd squirreled away from grocery cashbacks and forgotten holiday cards. Curtis handed her the account number and a debit card. "You're brave," he said quietly. Maria didn't respond, but her fingers tightened around the envelope. Before she left, she turned back. "If anyone comes here asking about me, especially a man named Daniel Gutierrez, you didn't see me." Curtis gave a single solemn nod. Back home, she sat at the kitchen table, listening. Silence. Daniel hadn't returned yet. She used the time to hide her new bank card in the pocket of an old cookbook no one had touched in years. She tucked paper statements into a zippered sewing kit. That afternoon, she walked to the local store under the guise of buying flour and came home with a basic prepaid cell phone. Nothing fancy. Cash only. She programmed 3 numbers: the police non-emergency line, Miss Harris's office, and Rosa. Then she turned off the ringer and hid the phone in the hollow base of her old sewing machine. By dusk, the house was still empty. Snow fell heavier now, muffling the world outside. She made soup again, salted this time, and sat alone at the table. For the first time, she didn't set a place for him. The door opened just after 7. Daniel stomped snow from his boots and looked over at the stove. "You cook today, or we ordering in?" he asked, pulling off his coat. "There's soup," she said evenly. He walked into the kitchen and sniffed the air. "Took you long enough to get it right," he muttered, ladling himself a bowl. Maria sat still, spoon in hand. Her scarf stayed on. He glanced at her. "Where were you all day, Ma?" Maria didn't flinch. "Out." His eyes narrowed. "You didn't answer the phone." She raised her spoon. "Wasn't near it." Daniel watched her for a long moment, then shrugged, sat down, and began to eat. But as he chewed, Maria watched him, not with fear, but calculation. He had devoured her time, her dignity, her silence. No, without even knowing it, she'd stolen something back, her future. At home, Daniel demands, "Where were you all day?" "He beat me at home. They welcomed me at theirs." The community center sat on the corner of Rosemont and 3rd, small, unassuming, and surrounded by patchy shrubs dusted in snow. Maria had passed it hundreds of times. She had even volunteered there once, long ago, when Henry was still alive and Daniel still smiled. But today, she walked through its doors alone. The smell hit her first: pot roast, warm bread, cinnamon, and safety. Inside, the large hall buzzed with laughter and clinking spoons. Long folding tables were filled with seniors in thick sweaters, chatting as volunteers in red aprons served steaming bowls of stew. A woman with silver-streaked hair and bright red glasses waved her over. "You here for the meal?" she asked, voice warm and unhurried. Maria nodded. The woman beamed. "Well, welcome. I'm Diane. Just grab a tray and find a seat anywhere." Maria hesitated for only a second. Then she picked up a tray and moved slowly to an open spot near the back. Across from her sat a woman about her age with dark eyes, soft curls, and a floral scarf. She smiled as Maria sat down. "First time?" Maria gave a small nod. "I'm Rosa," she said. "We don't ask questions here. We just eat, laugh, and complain about our backs." Maria smiled weakly, surprised by how easily the tension in her shoulders began to dissolve. The stew was hearty and perfectly salted. The cornbread melted like butter, and the laughter, the kind that didn't mock or sting, wrapped around her like a blanket she didn't know she'd missed. Rosa leaned closer. "You cook?" Maria looked up, startled. "Yes, all my life." "Thought so. You've got the hands of a woman